Hey Lydia, how's it going?
Hi, Sarah. I'm good. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It's so fun to just sit here and brainstorm and talk to you about what we're going to talk about that I'm like, ooh, and what about this? So it's always
There's a lot
fun.
to talk about too.
There's a lot to talk about. And, we were just talking that I think is so fascinating is, Lydia and I have been in the business a little while. We've known each other for like 11 years. And,
Yep.
when we talk about what we went through and what we saw happen in the 2008 crash and what happened, after that, there's so many, we all remember those stories of these houses that were, the brand new 4-bedroom home in Gilbert, in, central Gilbert for $80,000. And we're like, why didn't we buy this thing? And, the kind of, well, we're all saying, well, you know what, when houses go on sale this time, we're going to be ready. We're going to pounce. We're not going to let that house get away this time. But because that's our mindset, and I know Lydia and I are not alone in this,
Right.
That's exactly why the market is not going to crash. That's exactly why the houses are not going to go on sale, because we're all ready to buy them.
Right. And to Sarah, to that, there's been a lot of like first time home buyers that haven't been able to buy over the last couple of years. And they've kind of pulled out of the market because they didn't want to put an offer in with 15 or 20 other offers. So they're ready to buy, but so there are plenty of our own people here in Arizona that are going to be buying. So
yes, and they're going to be going after those too if they go on sale. But again, they're probably not going on sale. And there's a whole lot of reasons why. And that's why Lydia and I have been wanting to manage, especially when we're talking about these forbearance numbers, we want to manage what's happening and understand it so then we can accurately relay the information to our clients. And, I work with real estate agents, loan officers, investors. Lydia works with like buyers and sellers and servicing companies. So it's, this perspective, we're trying to just put it out there to explain to everybody why. Our goal is to just say, this is what's happening and why. And, that's why when we've been looking at these numbers, when forbearance launched, everybody thought it was going to be like 30% of borrowers would go on a forbearance plan. And in reality, I think it was like 8%, I think, started at the beginning. And, when we start looking at the number of borrowers that are in forbearance, even in the, in the last 4 weeks since we last did this, Lydia, it's already declined by 8.3%, which is about 100,000 borrowers. So we're looking at about 1.5 million borrowers are in forbearance, which is like 3% of loans. That's not a huge number. And what we're seeing is, yes, we're seeing some new people coming into forbearance, but there are more people exiting forbearance than there are coming in or renewing, or, and so that number just continues to get lower. And even if we look at, by stage, so we have had, so there are 11.3% of loans in forbearance are in their initial stage, and that's actually up 13% over the last month. So, that kind of seems, oh, wow, but over that same period of time, we have over 100,000 people getting out, so it's not comparatively. The amount in extension, it's about 80.2% of borrowers in forbearance are on extension, and that's a month over month decrease of 2.6%. And what's interesting is reentries are up though over the last month. So about 8.5% of borrowers in forbearance are a reentry, and that's up 10% in a month. And so that's where we're looking at it, but we're still having so many people leaving where they're maxing out, they're going the full time that they're allotted, and then they're getting out. And if we look at, kind of who's leaving, based on, so of the exits from June 1st, 2020 to September 12th, 2021, 42% of those borrowers either continued making their payments, were caught up upon exit, or paid off the loan, or did a refinance, paid it off. So that's a huge number. And then what we really need to pay attention to is that it's 16.4% of exits of borrowers are exiting still behind and without a loss mitigation plan in place. So that's really the number that we're looking at. And that's up about 2% in the last month. And so, just to put that number in perspective, if forbearance were to end today, and that 16.4% of the 1.5 million exited their plan all right now at one time, we're looking at about 246,000 borrowers, and that's across the country. So if we break it down by state, we're looking at just over 4,900 per state. And we
Right.
know that there's going to be some states that are more than less. And we're going, if
Right.
everything's equal, if we had 4,900 listings hit the market tomorrow, we'd be fine. It would be absorbed. Like,
right.
And you know
exactly.
what? And so here's the thing too, going into it, if you look at the equity positions as well, when we're going into it, so in Greater Phoenix, homes have appreciated by 35% since March of 2020. That's a lot.
That
And
is
that's given, it's a lot, but it's given a lot of people options. And even though, and so like the vast majority have at least 10% equity. So they would be able to sell through a normal sale upon exit, even if they can't, you know, so they're going to be able to walk away with money in their pocket.
I was going to say they'd even have something to leave with to go buy or put away for some other reason.
Exactly. Buy, put something down, rent, you know, figure it out. Like there's options, and that's good. And then you have to look at like the extent of the deferment of, you know, over time. So if we look at, and this is kind of, I've got this chart, I'm gonna do a quick screen share. But if you look at this chart, this is kind of outlining, you know, where we are. So if 7%, and that is if 7% have deferred everything, PITI, everything for 18 months, or sorry, if people have, there's about 7% that have less than 10% equity. I hope that makes sense. But essentially what that's saying is, so if it's 7% of the 1.5 million, we're just kind of going hypothetical, right? That's 105,000. That's not that many, you know, that may not have 10% equity. And then that breaks down to 2,100 per state. So again, these numbers are not big, and, you know, kind of thinking about what it is. Certainly these people will need help. They will need to know what their options are. And there's a lot of companies that are, you know, a lot of these loan companies are working with the borrowers and making it work for them. So they're helping them and, you know, not having to lose their homes.
Right. And a lot of them actually, we've talked about this in the past too, that a lot of those people that are probably going to have problems or having problems getting out of it without a loss mitigation, those were probably some of the people that were already in trouble prior to any of this happening. So, you know, it's not like it's all of a sudden all these people are having issues. And so you have to put everything into perspective.
That's something that's true across the board with this. You're absolutely right. Because there are always people who are behind. There are always foreclosures happening. And so that was happening right up like February 2020. That was happening too. So, you know, it's part of it that we do need to take into consideration.
Right. And I think too, the perspective of when you hear something like, oh my gosh, there's a tsunami of foreclosures coming, because I get a lot of those emails, and I'm like, I've even sat in on some of them, and I'm like, I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
Right. And I think that there's so many, and I'm with you, because I think that there's a lot of data that doesn't support. Or there's just these numbers that get thrown out, and there's some numbers where people are like, oh, well, if they live paycheck to paycheck, then they are at a greater risk. And it's like, I don't know the exact percentage, but, you know, it's a giant number of us, you know, of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck. And when you think about that, even if they have the money coming in and they have a great job and they can afford everything, they're still going paycheck to paycheck. And that's just, you know, part of life. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to miss a payment, you know, and even looking at it, our delinquency rate, the national delinquency rate has declined in August. The data came out, it's down to 4%, which is the lowest it's been since the onset of the pandemic. Now, where are the number that kind of is, and this is literally right what you were just saying, is serious delinquencies. And those are people who are 90 plus days late, dropped down in August, dropped from July by 108,000. There's about 1 million fewer than there were a year ago. And there's about 930,000 more seriously delinquent borrowers than there were in February of 2020. So we do know that increased, but the vast majority of those got to be 90 plus days late in March and April of 2020. So those were kind of like pre-existing beforehand. And, you know, so that's where it's not really skewed well because all the more recent data, everybody that got late more recently has gotten caught up again.
Right.
Now,
And some of those too, Sarah, probably that were late before the pandemic now have probably enough equity to be able to get out of wherever their situation is.
I think so. I mean, when we're talking a 35% increase, I know there are fees and everything involved with foreclosures, but not 35%, you know, like.
Right.
And even looking at foreclosures. So this is where we got to be really mindful of those headlines because, you know, I saw one, it says foreclosures are up 49% year over year. And it's like, yeah, but we had a foreclosure moratorium. It expired in July. There weren't any. And August, all we had were 7,100 foreclosures, and that's nationwide, 7,100 nationwide. And so, and a lot of those were actually they were properties that had started on the foreclosure process prior to the moratorium. So these are these old kind of residual ones. And we'll see them, you know, kind of falling through, you know, and going into foreclosure and being digested as it goes. But you got to compare it. That's still 80% lower than it was in August of 2019. And so even taking that into context, from 2017 to 2019, there was about an average of 24,200 foreclosures per month nationwide. So that 7,100 is not very many.
Nothing.
You know, and then the final piece as you kind of play into this, you know, are jobs, and Greater Phoenix has recovered all the jobs that we lost due to the pandemic. We have recovered, Greater Phoenix has. Now the entire state, we're still behind by about 9,600 jobs. We'll make it up real soon. We're going to be there. And that will be just to match the February 2020 employment levels. And, you know, we know that there's like everywhere you go, you see, you know, hiring, apply here, all those. And the last thing I saw, it was like 10.9 million job openings nationwide. So there are options that will, you know, struggling borrowers have available that will allow for them to be able to do a regular sale and walk away with some money. And, you know, as we kind of dig in, and this is where, like, I got to say, Lydia has got some stuff that is so fascinating. And, you know, as we're trying to say, okay, what's going to happen? What are we up against? You know, the whole world is changing so fast. Like, so Lydia, I know.
And you know, real estate can change like that in a split second. But on the servicing side of things, you know, I always get people saying, when are they coming? When are they coming? Because everybody's waiting for that fire sale again, like we had 10, 12 years ago. And that just isn't going to happen. First off, we're not going to see those $875,000 or $80,000 homes anymore. We're just not, you know, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity.
and we should have bought more of them. That's all we got to say, right? Like,
hindsight is 2020.
Always.
So, but on the servicing side, since the pandemic, obviously the servicers and the banks can't foreclose. So what I've been doing over the last year and a half has been drive-by inspections and drive-by BPOs. The drive-by inspections have typically been for, not all of them, but a lot of them have been for these iBuyers. So, you know, when the
big
market,
iBuyers, like the major
big iBuyers, So when the market went up, it was easy for these iBuyers to find people with equity, give them half their equity or a little bit more, and then they took the rest of it when they turned around, flipped them, and put them back on the market. So my job is to go out and just do the final inspection before they close. And it started out at the beginning of the pandemic. It started out in 2020, where I got maybe 3 to 5 a week, and then it just started snowballing, and I was getting 3 to 5 a day, literally, and it just kept going and kept going. But what's been interesting, and they actually give them to me even over the weekend, so it's not just a Monday through Friday. I'll have some of these over the weekend. But the last 2 weeks and the last 2 weekends, I've had none, which tells me
for the drive-bys.
Not the drive-bys at all. So what it tells me is that these iBuyers are not buying as much, or they're not buying at all. And I know you and I talked about that, Sarah, how some of them have kind of gotten caught up in they've kept buying when they should have been watching the market a little bit, because we started slowing down a little bit. It's hard for us agents to say we slowed down because we're still getting multiple offers, but we're not getting the 20
it's
offers.
not 1,000 offers per listing. It's like 10. And so you say that like, because our rate of appreciation has been slowing, and that's okay because it was so insane. It was just too big, and it was unsustainable anyway.
Right. And it drove some people out of the market and back on the fence again, because they don't want to deal with 25 other offers, where now, now you're getting anywhere from 3 to maybe 8, and it's not quite as bad. And some people are only getting 1 or 2 offers. So, it is a good time for buyers to start getting back into the market if they couldn't get something back a few months ago. But what this is telling me with the servicing is that the iBuyers have decided, oh my gosh, we got to get rid of this inventory, and we're not buying as much as, and they're not going to buy as much as they had. So, which is good for all of us in the regular real estate side of things.
As we were watching these numbers and we started seeing them, kind of like, these are not market value offers. And so a lot of people started getting a little stressed, saying, okay, why not? Why don't mess with our market? Because, after having been through what we've been through, we're like, you know what, let's just let the market do what the market is going to do, because when we mess with it, good things don't always happen.
Right.
And so
that is true.
Yeah, right. Like, exactly. And so I think some of the iBuyers have actually realized and said, oh, we're overpaying for the market, and either they're going to have to sell for a loss or hold the property on their books for some time, which I don't think is kind of either of their agendas,
Right. And it's just been very interesting. I mean, they should have been a little more careful on what they were watching. But what's been interesting is, because some of our sellers can go to those iBuyers and say, okay, what kind of price will you give me? Well, if you remember, Sarah, years ago when these iBuyers first started, they would give you a price and then they would knock it down at the inspection and say, well, we're knocking down 10,000 for carpet and 5,000 for paint, and that you need a new air conditioner. So you ended up with, like, they started out here, and then you ended up with this price. And I think we're going to start seeing that again. That's my opinion of what.
And that's still happening. It just was happening as they had their like set service fees. But I've also heard that service fees have gone up. And so that's another thing to be mindful of. I know one of them has increased their service fees from 5% to 9.7%. And that is a significant difference for a seller.
And that tells you something.
They're trying to recoup some of it. And I also heard that some of them are, even after inspection periods and everything are closed, they're pulling out of some of these as they realize that they're overpaying for the property.
Right. And some of them are willing to lose their earnest deposit just to get out from under them. I've heard that too. So,
but their earnest deposit is not what typical people put down for earnest. It's like $1,000 versus the 1%. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's all perspective, right?
Seriously.
So, yeah. So the other thing that I've noticed on the servicing side of things is, of course, BPOs. I've had some BPOs this last year and a half, just because I think some of the banks want to know, and the servicers want to know what the values are, not necessarily for foreclosures, or maybe they took the forbearances and they're kind of questionable on whether they're going to make their payments, right? So some of those BPOs I've been doing over the last year and a half, but I've gotten a large boatload dropped, 65 plus drop last week, which I thought was very interesting. Of regular BPOs, yes. Now they're still drive-by BPOs because of they won't let us into the house and all of that. But I started doing a little bit of research, and what I am finding is that some of those larger amounts of BPOs are being bought by large companies, investment companies that are coming in and buying them as rentals. So I don't know why they want BPOs, other than maybe they just want to know what the values are. But they've already bought them. So, and I kind of did a little bit of research, and I noticed that they are not using just one realtor office to be their agent. So like one was a Keller Williams, one was a Remax. So it doesn't give us like, I think we as agents would like notice things if one company came in and bought 65 homes in one fell swoop.
Right.
But because they're using different agents for it, people aren't noticing it. And so I just find that very interesting as well. And it goes
Huge
back
market for the rental, these corporate rental, corporate buyers, corporate renters, like
yep.
it is a huge market. And what the challenge is the properties are being removed from regular inventory,
right.
and the turnover goes way down. And we already know
Right.
the turnover is down. People are in their houses 10 years at a time, but they may
Right.
hold them longer depending on cash flow, and the way rental prices are just astronomical. I mean, you buy a median rental price and a median sale mortgage, like payment on a median mortgage
Yep.
or a median house, the rents are like $200 more a month.
Right. Well, and it takes the house off the market. You and I are both in the business of home ownership. So
Yes.
a rental, not that people, I mean, there are people that have to rent. We understand that, but
certainly
we're in the business to get people in the homes and actually buy them for themselves. So it does take these properties, and we already have low inventory. So now it's taking more properties.
Exactly. When we don't have the inventory for the buyers we have, seeing all this, losing all these houses to rentals, it kind of hurts a little, where we're like, but we need people, like the buyers are here, but it's hard for a first-time home buyer to compete with a cash rental buyer, and they're buying them off the MLS and they're paying full market value.
Right.
And so
they're
hard to compete with.
Well, what's interesting on one of them that I noticed, you'll find this interesting, they bought it with the tenant in it. Now the tenant was only paying $1,550 a month, but the tenant was only in for another December. I think the end of December is when they get out. I can guarantee you, because part of my BPO is how many rentals are in the area, what is the average rental price? Well, that area, the rental price was $2,500. Well, they're willing to keep somebody in there for a few months at $1,500, and they paid like, I don't know, almost $400,000. In a normal situation, an investor is not going to buy a house for $400,000 with a $1,500 rental. It just makes no sense. But they bought it because I can guarantee you they can get that guy out or that family out in December, and then they can bump it up another $1,000 a month. I mean, it is what it is.
And that's what a lot of them have been doing. As soon as they have, terms are, the terms are up, they're upping them. In April alone, a lot of the biggest companies like America Homes for Rent and Invitation Homes, they were upping rents by over 10% just for the new renter coming in. I mean, that's continuing because the supply and demand imbalance for rentals.
Right. And we don't have, some states have rent control. We don't have rent control here. So it's not like there's any kind of way to protect the renter. And that's the problem that we're finding. So I had given a couple of my clients to our property manager to kind of help with. And what they were telling me is, part of the problem right now is not only are more people renting, but you've got people who've always rented who maybe don't have as good a credit. Maybe they don't have a down payment, so they can't buy. And then you've got these agents that ended up selling their homeowners that sold their homes, and their agents weren't savvy enough or didn't care enough to get them into a home before they sold their home. So now homeowners are selling their home quickly for high price, which is great, but then they don't have a place to go to. So some of those people are turning into renters. And when you're a property management company and you're looking at two different applications, and you've got someone that's credit not so good, maybe not a lot in the bank, and then you've got a homeowner who just sold their home and has $250,000 in their bank account, and their credit score is 850, who do you think they're going to pick? I mean, now you're kind of, now the people that have always been renters are going to have issues as well. And so that's a whole nother economic situation.
The whole affordability conversation is, I mean, that's another beast in and of itself, because it is a struggle. And yes, wages have gone up. Yes, rates are very low for now. And, you know, I'm not saying they're going to skyrocket, but we do
Right.
know that it's like 54% of borrowers have a rate of 3.75 or less. That's going to play into buying and holding and staying in a property super long when, you
Right.
know, I don't think rates are going to hit 4% anytime soon, but if and when they do, people will be locked in their house. And
Right.
again, it furthers this challenge of the low supply, which then goes
Right.
back to the very first thing we talked about today was why our market's not going to crash.
Right, exactly.
It goes right back to it. If we have more demand than we have supply,
Right.
prices go up.
Right, exactly. And even if we don't have as many buyers, it will still become an even market at some point. You know, we're still going to have the even amount of buyers and the even amount of sellers. We haven't had that in a while. So, but Arizona is definitely a little more different than other states because,
I mean, we have a lot of people coming here.
Yeah. I mean,
because our inventory has been dropping since 2014. That's what a lot
Yeah.
of people don't necessarily recognize. It was like, it's been happening for years, but it didn't
Yes.
get awful until it was just everything kind of snowballed into,
Yeah.
you know, in 2020 when everybody realized, well, I need to go, I'm going to move or whatnot, you know, but
Right.
where'd all the
And
houses go?
remote working was popular.
Yeah.
So people in the Midwest were coming out here to work or to live because why be in snow when you can work from your home over next to your
100%
pool?
agree. Yes. Yes.
So yeah, it's been a very interesting last couple of years. And really, in my opinion, it's really important for not only, you know, families to understand all of this, but it really is important for us agents to understand what's going on in business and in economics. We talked about the stock market and what's going on with that. And, you know, I was in a mastermind group a couple of days ago and agents were like, well, why do we care that the stock market dropped 600 or 900 points 2 days ago? You know, it's because we need to educate our clients and we need to let them know why are these things happening? You know, why is this Japanese real estate industry, whatever company, why is that affecting
Chinese.
our stock market? You know what I'm saying?
It's Chinese, yes, but
Chinese,
yeah,
sorry.
Evergrande, and that's, I mean,
Evergrande.
exactly, and that also shows that news makes the stock market move a whole lot faster than the actual instance of what's happening. And so,
Right.
yes, it did drop and it has come up. It has not recovered everything, and it's not strictly because of, you know, this gigantic real estate developer that owes, you know, over $300 billion may default, but you know, that's frightening in and of itself. And yeah, a lot of people are saying, okay, what's going to happen to the investors in this company? And now there's a lot of different conversations. The Chinese investors may be protected, there may be some, you know, domestic protections available, but they're pretty much saying international investors are probably not going to be protected, and then they may, you know, they'll be up for loss. And that's also, context is key. You know, we see things like BlackRock as a $400 million investment in Evergrande, and that's, you know, whoo, that's a lot of money.
That sounds like a lot of money.
It sounds like a lot of money because 400 million is a lot of money for like people, you know, but for an entity like BlackRock, it's 0.01% of its total portfolio. So when you start thinking about it, if you lose 0.01% of a portfolio, like, you move on.
Right. They take it as a loss and that's it. And like you said, I mean, the stock market goes with news. And so it's not always accurate news, but it goes with the news. So we have to we as real estate agents and people who are homeowners trying to get into the home ownership, you really have to just take everything with, you have to learn and educate, take everything with a grain of salt and really do your homework. That's really, I mean, just because it's on the news and it's causing something to, like, you know, the stock market to crash one day or drop for a few points doesn't necessarily mean that the world is coming to an end. So
huge point. Yes.
Yeah.
So as always, I feel like we have endless array of topics to discuss just in this arena on forbearance that we've been focusing on for so long. And so I think it's interesting. And Lydia, as always, I just appreciate your insight and sharing so much of what you're seeing out there, because it's those boots on the ground experiences that you have that leads into and tells us the story. What is actually happening?
Right. Well, Sarah, you as always have great data information. You're the data queen.
I try.
But
So
it's great.
you.
It's great having you with this because you really put things into perspective for us. So
thanks, Lydia. I appreciate you. Well, sounds good. We will be back again soon talking about this more. So Lydia, thanks again for your time, and I will see you soon.
thanks, Sarah. Have a good week.
Bye.